Colonel Sarah Martinez adjusted her civilian clothes one last time before stepping onto the military airfield. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac, and the familiar smell of jet fuel filled her nostrils. After 15 years of distinguished service in the Navy SEALs, she had earned the right to wear civilian attire during certain assignments, but today's mission was different. She was traveling incognito to inspect a classified training facility, and her appearance needed to blend in with regular airport staff. Sarah had climbed through the ranks faster than most of her male counterparts, earning respect through sheer determination and exceptional skill. Her small frame often fooled people into underestimating her capabilities, something she had learned to use to her advantage throughout her military career. Today, dressed in simple khaki pants and a polo shirt with a generic security badge, she looked like any other ground crew member. The C-130 transport plane sat waiting on the runway, its engines already warming up. Sarah approached the aircraft with her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, mentally reviewing the mission briefings she had studied the night before. The facility she was heading to had reported several security breaches, and her job was to conduct a surprise evaluation of their protocols. As she neared the plane's loading ramp, a figure emerged from the cockpit. Captain James Morrison, a seasoned pilot with 20 years of flying experience, spotted what he assumed was a confused ground staff member wandering too close to his aircraft. His weathered face showed immediate irritation as he marched down the ramp toward Sarah. "Hey, you there," Morrison called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "This is a restricted military aircraft. Ground personnel aren't authorized to board without proper clearance." Sarah paused, looking up at the pilot with calm eyes. She had encountered this type of assumption countless times throughout her career. Rather than immediately revealing her identity, she decided to see how the situation would unfold. Sometimes the best intelligence came from observing how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. "I have clearance," Sarah replied simply. Reaching for her identification, Morrison waved dismissively before she could retrieve her credentials. "Look, miss, I don't know what department you're from, but this bird is carrying classified cargo and personnel. Unless you're on my manifest, you need to step away from the aircraft immediately." The pilot's tone grew more demanding as he spoke. He had dealt with numerous ground crew mistakes over the years, and in his experience, a firm approach solved problems quickly. What he didn't notice was the way Sarah carried herself. The perfect posture, the alert eyes that constantly scanned her surroundings, and the confident manner in which she stood her ground. "Check your manifest again," Sarah suggested, her voice remaining level despite the pilot's increasingly aggressive stance. "You might find something interesting." Morrison's face reddened slightly. "Ma'am, I've been flying military aircraft since before you were probably old enough to drive. I know who belongs on my plane and who doesn't. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time to step away from this aircraft before I call security." Other crew members began to notice the commotion. A young airman loading supplies stopped his work to watch the exchange, while the co-pilot peered out from the cockpit window. The situation was drawing exactly the kind of attention Sarah had hoped to avoid, but she recognized this as an opportunity to test the base's response protocols. "Sir, if you would just look at the passenger list," Sarah began, but Morrison cut her off. "That's Captain Morrison to you, and I don't need to look at anything. What I need is for you to follow orders and remove yourself from this area immediately. This is your final warning before I have you escorted off this base." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Sarah. Here was a captain ordering a colonel to leave, all because he had made assumptions based on her appearance. She had faced similar challenges throughout her military career, but they never stopped being frustrating. However, she also understood that Morrison was following proper security protocols, even if his approach was unnecessarily harsh. A small crowd was beginning to gather as other personnel noticed the confrontation. Sarah could see several junior enlisted members watching with interest, probably wondering why someone who looked like ground staff was arguing with a pilot. She knew that revealing her identity now would cause embarrassment for Morrison, but continuing to play along might provide valuable insights into base security procedures. "Captain Morrison," Sarah said, emphasizing his rank, "I understand your concerns about security. However, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding here is you thinking you can waltz up to my aircraft without proper authorization," Morrison replied, his voice growing louder. "I've seen too many breaches in protocol lately, and I won't tolerate another one on my watch. The pilot turned toward the young airman who had been watching the exchange. "Airman Richards, call the security office and have them send someone to escort this woman off the flight line. Tell them we have an unauthorized person attempting to board a classified transport." Airman Richards looked uncertain, glancing between Morrison and Sarah. Something about the woman's demeanor didn't match that of someone who had accidentally wandered into a restricted area. Her calm confidence and the way she held herself suggested military training. But he wasn't about to question a captain's direct order. "Yes, sir," Richards replied, reaching for his radio. Sarah realized the situation was about to escalate beyond what she had intended. While part of her mission involved testing security responses, she didn't want to cause unnecessary problems for the young airman or create a situation that would delay the flight. The classified nature of her assignment meant that too much attention could compromise the entire operation. "Before you make that call," Sarah said, reaching slowly into her pocket, "perhaps you should take a look at this." She pulled out a leather wallet and opened it to reveal her military identification card. The morning sunlight caught the eagle insignia on her ID, and Morrison's eyes widened as he read the name and rank clearly displayed on the credential. The color drained from Morrison's face as he realized his mistake. Standing before him wasn't a confused ground crew member, but Colonel Sarah Martinez, one of the highest-ranking female officers in Naval Special Warfare Command. Captain Morrison's hand trembled slightly as he processed what he was seeing. The identification card clearly showed Colonel Sarah Martinez, and her photograph matched the woman standing before him. The rank insignia seemed to mock his earlier assumptions, and he felt his stomach drop as the full weight of his mistake became clear. "Colonel, I had no idea," Morrison stammered, his face now completely pale. The confidence and authority he had displayed moments earlier evaporated like morning mist. "Your name wasn't on the passenger manifest I received, and you're not in uniform, so I naturally assumed." Sarah watched as the pilot struggled to find words that might somehow undo his error. She had seen this reaction many times before, the moment when someone realized they had misjudged her based on appearance rather than credentials. While she understood his confusion, his aggressive approach had been unnecessary and unprofessional. Assumptions can be dangerous in our line of work. "Captain," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady but firm, "but you're correct about one thing. My name wouldn't be on your standard manifest. This is a classified assignment, and my travel orders were processed through special channels." Airman Richards slowly lowered his radio, uncertain whether he should still call security. The young man's eyes darted between the colonel and the captain, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the air. Several other personnel had stopped their work to observe the exchange, creating exactly the kind of scene that Sarah had hoped to avoid. Morrison straightened his posture and attempted to regain some composure. "Colonel Martinez, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. If you could provide your travel orders, I'll verify them immediately and get you aboard." "The orders are classified, Captain. Your commanding officer received notification through proper channels, but the details weren't shared with flight crews for security reasons," Sarah explained. "That's precisely why I'm dressed in civilian clothes." The pilot nodded rapidly, eager to show his understanding. "Of course, ma'am. Operational security. I should have considered that possibility before jumping to conclusions." Sarah studied Morrison's face, noting the genuine remorse in his expression. She had dealt with officers who were merely embarrassed at being caught in a mistake, but the captain seemed genuinely concerned about his error in judgment. This distinction mattered to her, as it suggested he might actually learn from the experience. "Captain, may I ask how you typically handle situations when you encounter unfamiliar personnel near your aircraft?" Sarah inquired, her tone professional but probing. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Standard protocol is to verify identification and check manifests, ma'am. If someone isn't on the authorized list, we're supposed to contact the duty officer before taking any action." "And did you follow that protocol today?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Morrison's face reddened again, but this time from embarrassment rather than anger. "No, ma'am. I made assumptions and acted on them without following proper procedures." "I was wrong." Sarah appreciated his honest admission. Throughout her career, she had encountered officers who would make excuses or try to shift blame when confronted with their mistakes. Morrison's willingness to acknowledge his error without deflection showed character, even if his initial judgment had been poor. "Captain, I want you to understand something," Sarah continued. Your instinct to protect your aircraft and cargo was correct. Security is everyone's responsibility, and I respect your dedication to that principle. However, your approach bypassed established protocols and could have created a significant security incident. The gathering crowd made Sarah increasingly uncomfortable. Her mission required discretion, and the current situation was drawing far too much attention. She needed to resolve this quickly and board the aircraft before more people became curious about the confrontation. Furthermore, she added, lowering her voice so only Morrison could hear, making assumptions about someone's capabilities or authority based on their appearance is a luxury we can't afford in military operations. The enemy doesn't always look like what we expect. Morrison nodded solemnly, clearly absorbing the lesson. You're absolutely right, Colonel. I let my preconceptions cloud my judgment, and that was inexcusable. A new voice interrupted their conversation. Is there a problem here, Captain Morrison? Both Sarah and Morrison turned to see Major David Chen approaching from the direction of the control tower. The base operations officer had been monitoring radio chatter and decided to investigate when he heard about a potential security incident involving the transport flight. Major Chen, Morrison began. I'd like to introduce you to Colonel Martinez, Chen interrupted, recognition immediately crossing his face. Ma'am, I received word that you would be traveling with us today, though the details were limited. I apologize if there's been any confusion regarding your transportation. Sarah felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone who had been properly briefed on her presence. Major, thank you. There was indeed some confusion, but Captain Morrison and I have resolved the matter. Chen's eyes moved between the colonel and the pilot, clearly sensing that something significant had occurred. As an experienced operations officer, he could read the tension in the air and Morrison's obvious discomfort. Colonel, if you're ready to board, we can proceed with departure. Your mission timeline is tight, and any delays could impact your arrival schedule. Chen offered diplomatically. That would be excellent, Major. Captain Morrison, shall we proceed? Morrison straightened and gestured toward the aircraft. Absolutely, ma'am. Right this way. As they walked toward the loading ramp, Sarah could feel the eyes of various personnel following their movement. The incident had created more attention than she would have preferred, but it also provided valuable intelligence about base security protocols and personnel training. Colonel, Morrison said quietly as they approached the aircraft, I want you to know that this experience has been educational for me. I pride myself on professionalism, and I fell short of that standard today. Sarah paused at the base of the ramp. Captain, we all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them. Tell me, what will you do differently in similar situations going forward? Morrison considered the question carefully. I'll follow established protocols without exception, verify identification properly, and avoid making assumptions based on appearance. Most importantly, I'll remember that respect is earned through actions, not predetermined by how someone looks. That's a good start, Sarah replied. Now, shall we get this mission underway? As they climbed the ramp into the aircraft, Sarah reflected on the morning's events. The incident had been unfortunate, but it revealed important truths about security procedures and human nature that would inform her upcoming evaluation. The interior of the C-130 transport plane was exactly what Sarah expected: functional, utilitarian, and designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Red-webbed seats lined the walls, and cargo nets secured various military supplies in the center of the aircraft. The familiar smell of metal and hydraulic fluid brought back memories of countless similar flights throughout her career. As Sarah settled into her seat, she noticed Captain Morrison conducting his pre-flight checks with unusual thoroughness. Every procedure was executed precisely, and he double-checked items that experienced pilots typically verified by routine. The morning's incident had clearly affected him more deeply than he had initially let on. Co-pilot Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh approached Sarah with a clipboard. Colonel Martinez, I have some additional paperwork that requires your signature for our flight records. It's standard procedure for classified personnel transport. Sarah accepted the clipboard and quickly reviewed the documents. Lieutenant Walsh seemed professional and competent, a stark contrast to her captain's earlier behavior. The young officer's eyes held a hint of curiosity, but she maintained appropriate military bearing throughout their interaction. Lieutenant, how long have you been flying with Captain Morrison? Sarah asked as she signed the papers. About 18 months, ma'am. He's an excellent pilot and normally very professional. I've never seen him react quite like he did this morning, Walsh replied diplomatically. The comment confirmed Sarah's suspicion that Morrison's behavior had been unusual, even by his own standards. This suggested that something beyond simple prejudice had influenced his actions, though it didn't excuse his failure to follow proper protocols. As the engines powered up and the aircraft began to taxi, Sarah found herself thinking about the broader implications of the morning's events. Throughout her military career, she had encountered countless situations where her appearance and gender led to incorrect assumptions about her capabilities. However, each incident also provided opportunities to challenge those preconceptions and potentially change attitudes. The takeoff was smooth, and soon they were climbing to cruising altitude. Through the small porthole window, Sarah watched the military base shrink below them, eventually disappearing beneath a layer of clouds. The flight to her destination would take approximately 3 hours, giving her time to review mission materials and reflect on the morning's unexpected lesson in human nature. About an hour into the flight, Captain Morrison left the cockpit and approached Sarah's seat. His expression was serious, and he carried a steaming cup of coffee as a peace offering. "Colonel, would you mind if I sat with you for a few minutes? I'd like to apologize properly for my behavior earlier." Sarah gestured to the empty seat beside her. "Of course, Captain. Please sit down." Morrison settled into the webbed seat, clearly uncomfortable but determined to have the conversation. "Ma'am, I've been thinking about what happened this morning, and I realized that my actions went beyond a simple mistake in judgment. They reflected poorly on my training, my professionalism, and my character. I appreciate your honesty, Captain. Tell me what you think went wrong." Morrison stared at his hands for a moment before responding. "I made assumptions based on stereotypes, and I let those assumptions override my training. When I saw someone who didn't fit my mental image of a high-ranking officer, I immediately dismissed the possibility that you could be important to the mission." Sarah nodded, recognizing the genuine remorse in his voice. "That's a significant realization. What led you to that mental image in the first place?" "Honestly, most of the colonels I've worked with have been older men in uniform. I've rarely interacted with female officers of your rank and never in civilian clothes. That's not an excuse, just an explanation of my limited perspective." The admission revealed more than Morrison probably intended. It highlighted the broader issue of representation in senior military positions and how that lack of diversity could perpetuate unconscious biases among personnel who rarely encountered women in leadership roles. "Captain, your honesty is refreshing, but I need you to understand something important," Sarah said, her tone becoming more serious. "In special operations, the ability to look beyond surface appearances can mean the difference between mission success and failure, between life and death." Morrison's eyes widened slightly as he began to grasp the deeper implications of his mistake. "The enemies we face don't always wear uniforms or carry identification cards," Sarah continued. "They blend in, they appear harmless, and they exploit our assumptions about who poses a threat and who doesn't. If you can misjudge a colleague so completely, how might that same thinking affect your judgment in a tactical situation?" The pilot's face grew pale as he considered the scenario Sarah had described. "I never thought about it that way, ma'am. You're right. My assumptions could be dangerous in operational context." "Exactly. The skills required for proper threat assessment go far beyond recognizing military ranks and uniforms. They require an open mind, attention to detail, and the ability to look beyond surface characteristics." Morrison absorbed this information quietly, clearly processing the broader lessons embedded in their morning encounter. Sarah could see that he was beginning to understand the full scope of his error and its potential consequences. "Colonel, may I ask about your background? I mean, how did you reach your current position?" "I imagine the path wasn't always easy." Sarah considered the question carefully. While she generally preferred to keep personal information private, Morrison's genuine interest in learning suggested that sharing some experiences might be beneficial. "The path to my current position required twice as much effort as it would have for many of my male counterparts," she replied honestly. "Every promotion, every assignment, every evaluation involved proving myself repeatedly. I had to be better than good enough. I had to be exceptional." "That doesn't seem fair," Morrison observed. "Fairness is a luxury we can't always afford in military service," Sarah replied. "What matters is capability, determination, and results. I focused on excelling in those areas rather than dwelling on obstacles I couldn't control." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. I can see why this morning's incident was particularly frustrating for you. After working so hard to earn respect and recognition, having someone dismiss you based on appearance must have been infuriating. Frustrating, yes, but not surprising, Sarah admitted. I've learned to use those moments as teaching opportunities rather than letting them derail my mission focus. The conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Walsh's voice over the intercom. Captain Morrison, we're beginning our descent to the destination. Your presence is requested in the cockpit. Morrison stood and extended his hand to Sarah. Colonel, thank you for taking the time to educate me. I promise you that I'll apply these lessons going forward, and I'll make sure my crew understands the importance of following proper protocols, without exception. Sarah shook his hand firmly. I appreciate that commitment, Captain. Remember, leadership isn't just about giving orders. It's about setting an example that others want to follow. As Morrison returned to the cockpit, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic about the encounter's ultimate outcome. While the morning had begun with a significant breach of protocol and professional judgment, it had evolved into a meaningful learning experience that might prevent similar incidents in the future. The aircraft touched down smoothly at the remote military installation, and Sarah gathered her belongings as the engines wound down. Through the porthole, she could see a stark landscape of concrete buildings and training facilities surrounded by high-security fences. This was exactly the type of classified location where her evaluation skills would be put to the test. As the loading ramp lowered, Sarah noticed a small reception committee waiting on the tarmac. 3 officers stood at attention near a military vehicle, clearly prepared to escort her to the facility commander. The formal reception was exactly what she had hoped to avoid, but apparently her arrival had generated more attention than anticipated. Captain Morrison appeared beside her as she prepared to disembark. Colonel, I want you to know that this flight has been one of the most educational experiences of my career. I hope our paths cross again under better circumstances. Captain, I have no doubt they will, Sarah replied. The military is smaller than people think, especially in specialized communities. Remember what we discussed today and don't let it happen again. Morrison snapped to attention and saluted crisply. Understood, ma'am. Thank you for your patience and your instruction. Sarah returned the salute and walked down the ramp toward the waiting officers. The base commander, Colonel Robert Hayes, stepped forward to greet her. His weathered face showed the kind of experience that came from decades of military service, and his bearing suggested a man accustomed to command. Colonel Martinez, welcome to Fort Henderson. I'm Colonel Hayes, the installation commander. I trust your flight was comfortable? Thank you, Colonel Hayes. The flight was quite educational, Sarah replied, catching the subtle irony in her choice of words. I'm ready to begin the security evaluation whenever you are. Hayes gestured toward the waiting vehicle. Excellent. We've prepared a comprehensive briefing on our current security protocols and recent incident reports. However, I should mention that not everyone on my staff is aware of your true purpose here. This information was exactly what Sarah had hoped to hear. The most effective security evaluations occurred when personnel didn't know they were being observed and tested. Natural behavior patterns revealed more about actual security posture than formal presentations ever could. That's perfect, Colonel. The less people know about my evaluation, the more accurate my assessment will be. As they drove through the base, Sarah observed the various security checkpoints, guard positions, and access controls. Her trained eye automatically cataloged potential vulnerabilities and areas for improvement. The morning's incident with Captain Morrison had already provided valuable insights into how personnel handled unexpected situations. The base headquarters building was typical of military installations, functional architecture, designed for efficiency rather than aesthetics. Colonel Hayes led her through corridors lined with unit photographs and awards, eventually arriving at a secure conference room where several staff officers waited. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet our new security consultant, Ms. Sarah Martinez. She'll be conducting an assessment of our protocols and procedures over the next few days. Sarah noted Hayes's deliberate omission of her military rank and title. This was clearly part of the evaluation design, allowing her to observe how staff members interacted with someone they perceived as a civilian contractor, rather than a senior military officer. Major Peter Krantz, the installation security officer, stepped forward to shake hands. Ms. Martinez, welcome to Fort Henderson. I've prepared detailed briefings on all our security measures, incident reports, and personnel procedures. Thank you, Major Krantz. I'm looking forward to reviewing your materials. However, I find that the most valuable insights come from observing actual operations rather than studying reports. Krantz nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. I've arranged for you to shadow our security teams during their regular duties. You'll get a complete picture of how we operate. Sarah smiled internally. Major Krantz's eagerness to showcase his security program suggested either exceptional confidence or dangerous overconfidence. Time would tell which assessment was accurate. The briefing that followed was thorough and professional. Krantz presented statistics on security incidents, response times, and training metrics. His staff answered questions competently and demonstrated detailed knowledge of their procedures. On paper, Fort Henderson appeared to maintain excellent security standards. However, Sarah's years of experience had taught her that the gap between written procedures and actual implementation could be substantial. Real security effectiveness was measured not by documentation, but by how personnel performed under pressure when facing unexpected challenges. Major Krantz, I'd like to begin my observations this afternoon if possible. Could you arrange for me to accompany your perimeter patrol teams? Of course, Ms. Martinez. Sergeant Williams runs our most experienced patrol unit. I'll have him show you our standard procedures. After the briefing concluded, Colonel Hayes walked Sarah to her temporary quarters. The small apartment was sparse but comfortable, typical of facilities provided for visiting contractors and temporary personnel. Colonel Martinez, Hayes said quietly once they were alone, I want you to know that this evaluation is critically important to us. We've had several security incidents recently that have raised concerns at higher headquarters. What type of incidents, Colonel? Hayes's expression grew serious. Nothing catastrophic, but troubling nonetheless. Unauthorized personnel found in restricted areas, equipment missing from secure storage, and reports of individuals who didn't match our personnel records being observed on base. This information immediately captured Sarah's attention. The incidents described suggested either serious security breaches or significant failures in personnel accountability systems. Either possibility represented a substantial threat to installation security. Have you identified any patterns in these incidents? That's what we're hoping you'll help us determine. Our internal investigations haven't uncovered definitive explanations, and we need an outside perspective to identify what we might be missing. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Colonel, I'll need complete access to incident reports, personnel records, and security logs. I also want to conduct interviews with key personnel without advance notice. You'll have whatever you need, Hayes assured her. Just remember that most of my staff believes you're a civilian contractor. Maintaining that cover will give you better insights into our actual operations. After Hayes departed, Sarah unpacked her belongings and reviewed the materials he had provided. The incident reports painted a disturbing picture of declining security effectiveness, but the individual events seemed unrelated and random. Her years of investigation experience suggested that apparent randomness often concealed deliberate patterns. As she prepared for the afternoon patrol observation, Sarah reflected on the morning's encounter with Captain Morrison. His initial assumptions and aggressive response had revealed important truths about security mindset and protocol adherence. If similar attitudes existed among the base security personnel, they could explain some of the recent incidents. The phone in her quarters rang, interrupting her thoughts. Ms. Martinez, this is Sergeant Williams. Major Krantz asked me to escort you on this afternoon's perimeter patrol. I'll meet you at the security office in 30 minutes if that works for your schedule. That's perfect, Sergeant Williams. I'll see you there. Sarah gathered her notebook and camera, standard equipment for security consultants. However, she also checked the concealed recording device hidden in her jacket pocket. Her real mission required documentation that could be used for official recommendations and potential disciplinary actions. As she walked toward the security office, Sarah wondered what other surprises this assignment would reveal. The morning's flight had already provided unexpected insights into personnel training and protocol adherence. Now it was time to discover what security challenges awaited her at Fort Henderson. Sergeant Williams was exactly what Sarah expected from an experienced military security professional: alert eyes, confident bearing, and the kind of situational awareness that came from years of training. He greeted her outside the security office with a firm handshake and a professional smile. Ms. Martinez, I understand you're here to evaluate our security procedures. I've been running perimeter patrols for 8 years, so I'm happy to show you how we operate. Thank you, Sergeant. I'm particularly interested in how your teams handle unexpected situations and unusual encounters. Williams led her to a military police vehicle equipped with communication gear and monitoring equipment. We conduct regular patrols every 4 hours, with random checks in between. The perimeter is approximately 12 miles, and we maintain radio contact with the Central Security Office throughout each patrol. As they drove toward the first checkpoint, Sarah observed Williams's methodical approach to his duties. He checked every gate, inspected fence lines for damage, and verified the status of electronic sensors. His attention to detail was impressive and suggested well-developed security habits. "Sergeant, have you noticed any unusual activity during recent patrols?" Williams glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Actually, yes. Over the past month, we've encountered several people who claimed to be lost or confused about base boundaries. Most seemed harmless, but something about their stories didn't add up. This information aligned with the incident reports Colonel Hayes had mentioned." Sarah made mental notes while maintaining the appearance of casual interest. "What made their stories seem suspicious?" "Well, for instance, last week we found a man near the east fence who claimed his car broke down, and he was looking for help. But when we checked, there was no disabled vehicle anywhere in the area. When we questioned him further, he couldn't provide consistent details about where he had been or where he was going." Sarah's investigative instincts immediately activated. "How did you handle the situation?" "We escorted him off base and filed a report, but by the time security officers tried to follow up, he had disappeared. No local hotels had any record of him, and the phone number he provided was disconnected." The pattern Williams described suggested possible reconnaissance activity rather than innocent confusion. Professional intelligence operatives often used cover stories involving mechanical problems or getting lost to explain their presence near sensitive facilities. "Have you shared these observations with Major Krantz?" Williams nodded. "Yes, ma'am. All incidents are reported through proper channels. Major Krantz has been very concerned about the increase in suspicious encounters." They approached the east perimeter fence, the same area where Williams had encountered the suspicious individual. Sarah examined the fence line carefully, noting sightlines, potential hiding spots, and areas where someone might observe base activities without being detected. "Sergeant, show me exactly where you found this person." Williams parked the vehicle and led her to a specific section of fence. The area provided an excellent view of several classified training facilities, and Sarah immediately understood why someone conducting surveillance might choose this location. "He was standing right here when we spotted him, claimed he was trying to get cell phone reception to call for help. But we're in a dead zone for civilian carriers." Sarah examined the ground around the fence, looking for signs that someone had spent extended time in the area. Her SEAL training had included extensive instruction in tracking and reconnaissance, skills that proved valuable in security evaluation work. "There," she said, pointing to disturbed vegetation near the fence. "These marks suggest someone was here for longer than a few minutes. See how the grass is flattened in a pattern consistent with someone lying prone for observation?" Williams studied the area Sarah indicated, his expression growing concerned. "I didn't notice that during our initial investigation. You have a good eye for detail." "Experience in security work develops those observational skills," Sarah replied, maintaining her civilian contractor cover. "Have you considered installing additional sensors in this area?" "We've discussed it, but budget constraints have limited our upgrades. Major Krantz prioritizes improvements based on threat assessments and available funding." As they continued the patrol, Williams shared additional incidents that painted a troubling picture of increasing surveillance attempts. The pattern suggested organized intelligence gathering rather than random criminal activity or innocent mistakes. Their radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Unit 7, we have a report of suspicious activity near the north gate. Respond immediately." Williams accelerated toward the location, giving Sarah an unexpected opportunity to observe how base security responded to active incidents. Within minutes, they arrived at the north gate where 2 other security vehicles had already established a perimeter. A young corporal approached their vehicle. "Sergeant Williams, we caught someone trying to climb the fence near Building 12. Claims he was retrieving a baseball that went over the fence during a game." Sarah studied the suspect, a middle-aged man in casual clothes who appeared nervous but cooperative. Something about his explanation immediately struck her as implausible. Building 12 housed classified research facilities, and there were no recreational areas nearby. Has anyone verified his story about the baseball? Sarah asked quietly. William spoke with the other security personnel, then returned with a concerned expression. No baseball was found in the area, and there are no recreational facilities within half a mile of this location. What identification did he provide? A driver's license, but it shows an address over 200 miles away. He claims he's visiting relatives in the area, but can't provide specific details about where they live. Sarah's years of experience immediately recognized the hallmarks of a poorly constructed cover story. Professional intelligence operatives received extensive training in maintaining consistent false identities, but this individual's story contained obvious gaps and inconsistencies. Sergeant, I recommend conducting a thorough background check on this individual and contacting local law enforcement to verify his story. This incident, combined with your recent encounters, suggests a pattern that requires investigation. Williams nodded and began coordinating with the other security team members. Sarah observed their procedures carefully, noting both strengths and areas for improvement in their response protocols. As the suspect was processed and removed from the area, Sarah realized that her security evaluation had uncovered something far more serious than routine procedural weaknesses. The evidence suggested that Fort Henderson was being targeted by organized intelligence gathering efforts. Sergeant Williams, I need to speak with Major Krantz and Colonel Hayes immediately. This situation requires escalation to higher security levels. Yes, ma'am. I'll arrange that meeting as soon as we return to headquarters. During the drive back to the security office, Sarah considered the implications of her discoveries. What had begun as a routine security evaluation was evolving into a potential counterintelligence investigation. Her unique position as an undercover colonel conducting security assessments placed her in an ideal situation to coordinate the base's response to these threats. However, she also realized that maintaining her civilian contractor cover might become increasingly difficult as the investigation progressed. The expertise she had demonstrated during the afternoon patrol might raise questions about her background and qualifications. As they approached the headquarters building, Sarah made a decision that would change the entire dynamic of her mission. The security threats facing Fort Henderson were too serious to address while maintaining false pretenses about her identity and capabilities. It was time to reveal who she really was and take direct command of the situation. The emergency meeting in Colonel Hayes' office was tense from the moment Sarah walked through the door. Major Krantz and Sergeant Williams sat at a conference table covered with incident reports, photographs, and security logs. The afternoon's discoveries had transformed a routine evaluation into a potential security crisis. Gentlemen, Sarah began, her voice carrying a new authority that immediately captured their attention. Before we proceed, I need to clarify something important about my identity and purpose here. Colonel Hayes nodded knowingly, recognizing that the time for deception had passed. Ms. Martinez, or should I say Colonel Martinez, I believe the situation has evolved beyond our original parameters. Major Krantz's eyes widened in surprise, while Sergeant Williams sat back in his chair with sudden understanding. The civilian contractor they had been working with was actually a senior military officer, and her expertise suddenly made perfect sense. Colonel Martinez? Krantz repeated, clearly struggling to process this revelation. You're military? Sarah reached into her jacket and produced her identification card, placing it on the table where both men could examine it clearly. Colonel Sarah Martinez, Naval Special Warfare Command. I'm here conducting a classified security evaluation, but the evidence we've discovered this afternoon suggests we're dealing with organized intelligence gathering against this installation. Sergeant Williams studied her credentials carefully, then looked up with newfound respect. Ma'am, that explains your exceptional observational skills and security knowledge. I should have recognized military training. You performed your duties excellently, Sergeant. Your detailed reporting and careful documentation have provided crucial intelligence about these suspicious activities, Major. Krantz appeared uncomfortable as he processed the implications of Sarah's true identity. Colonel, I apologize if our procedures or briefings were inadequate. Had I known your actual rank and background, Major, your procedures were professional and thorough, Sarah interrupted. However, the security threats we've identified require immediate action that goes beyond standard installation protocols. She moved to the whiteboard and began sketching a timeline of the suspicious incidents. Based on your reports and today's observations, someone has been conducting systematic surveillance of this facility for at least 6 weeks. The pattern suggests professional intelligence operations rather than casual criminal activity. Colonel Hayes leaned forward, his expression grave. Colonel Martinez, what do you recommend? First, we need to immediately enhance perimeter security and implement counterintelligence measures. Second, we must coordinate with federal law enforcement and military intelligence units. Third, we need to conduct a comprehensive review of all personnel with access to classified materials. Major Krantz was taking rapid notes as Sarah outlined her recommendations. Colonel, do you suspect insider involvement? It's possible, but the evidence is more consistent with external surveillance supported by technical intelligence gathering. The individuals your teams encountered were likely collecting information about security procedures, patrol schedules, and facility layouts. Sarah turned to Sergeant Williams. Sergeant, I want you to conduct immediate interviews with all security personnel who encountered suspicious individuals over the past 2 months. Get detailed descriptions, exact locations, and precise timelines. Yes, ma'am. I'll start immediately. Major Krantz, coordinate with base communications to review all electronic systems for signs of unauthorized access or signal interception. These operations often include technical surveillance components. Krantz nodded enthusiastically. I'll have our IT security team run comprehensive diagnostics on all systems. Colonel Hayes stood and moved to his secure phone. I'll contact higher headquarters and request immediate assistance from counterintelligence specialists. This situation clearly exceeds our internal capabilities. As the team began implementing her recommendations, Sarah reflected on the unexpected turn her evaluation mission had taken. What began as a routine assessment of security procedures had uncovered serious threats to national security that required immediate action. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her commanding officer. The text was brief but clear. Evaluation parameters changed. Assume operational command as needed. Full support authorized. The message confirmed what Sarah had already decided. Her role had evolved from observer to operational commander. The security of Fort Henderson and its classified research programs now depended on her ability to coordinate an effective counterintelligence response. Colonel Hayes, Sarah announced, I've received authorization to assume operational command of this security situation. I'll need complete access to all base resources and personnel. Hayes didn't hesitate. Understood, Colonel Martinez. What are your immediate requirements? I want all security patrols doubled and randomized. No predictable patterns that surveillance teams can anticipate. Station plainclothes personnel at key observation points to identify anyone conducting reconnaissance, and I want immediate background checks on all civilian personnel who've had base access in the past month. Major Krantz looked up from his notes. Colonel, should we consider temporarily restricting access to the most sensitive facilities? Excellent suggestion, Major. Implement immediate security upgrades for all classified research areas. Anyone requiring access must be cleared through my office personally. Sergeant Williams returned with preliminary interview reports from his security teams. Ma'am, we've identified at least 7 suspicious encounters over the past 6 weeks, all following similar patterns. The individuals involved provided inconsistent stories and disappeared quickly after being questioned. Sarah studied the reports carefully, noting the geographic distribution of the encounters. These locations provide comprehensive coverage of our entire perimeter. Someone has been mapping our security procedures systematically. The magnitude of the intelligence operation became clear as they analyzed the accumulated evidence. Fort Henderson had been under sustained surveillance by professionals who understood military security procedures and had developed sophisticated methods for gathering information without triggering immediate alarm. Colonel Hayes, I recommend immediate notification of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. This operation shows characteristics of foreign intelligence services, and we need federal resources to investigate properly. Hayes was already reaching for his secure communication equipment. I'll make those contacts immediately. As the evening progressed, Fort Henderson transformed from a routine military installation into the center of an active counterintelligence operation. Additional security personnel arrived from nearby bases. Federal agents began coordinating with military investigators. and specialized technical teams started sweeping for electronic surveillance devices. Sarah found herself coordinating multiple agencies and military units. Drawing on her years of experience in complex operations, the morning's encounter with Captain Morrison seemed like a distant memory compared to the current crisis. But she recognized that both situations involved the same fundamental challenges of leadership, judgment, and professional competence. By midnight, preliminary results were emerging from the investigation. Electronic sweeps had discovered several sophisticated listening devices near classified facilities, and database searches had identified patterns linking the suspicious individuals to known intelligence operatives. Colonel Martinez, Agent Rebecca Foster from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division reported, "We've confirmed that this installation was targeted by a coordinated intelligence gathering operation. Your quick recognition of the threat patterns may have prevented significant compromises of classified information." Sarah nodded with satisfaction. "Agent Foster, this was a team effort. The base security personnel provided excellent intelligence that made our response possible." As dawn approached, Sarah realized that her unexpected assignment had evolved far beyond its original scope. What began as a routine security evaluation had become a successful counterintelligence operation that protected vital national security interests. The morning sun illuminated Fort Henderson's perimeter as Sarah conducted a final inspection of the enhanced security measures. The installation was now protected by multiple layers of surveillance detection, and the attempted intelligence-gathering operation had been neutralized. Captain Morrison's transport aircraft was scheduled to return that afternoon for her departure. Sarah looked forward to informing him that their morning conversation about assumptions and professional judgment had proven remarkably relevant to the day's events. Sometimes, the most important lessons came from unexpected sources, and the most significant discoveries emerged from routine assignments. Her experience at Fort Henderson had demonstrated both truths in ways she would remember throughout the remainder of her distinguished military career.